Esther had first cheated on me while we were still dating. She had begged, sobbed, and sworn she had made a mistake. She promised it would never happen again. And I, like a fool, believed her. Esther had a past, an extensive one. She never hid it from me, but she framed it in a way that made it seem like a distant chapter of her life, something she had outgrown. I was reckless back then, she told me one evening, her eyes filled with what I thought was sincerity. Dating around, being with different men, it made me feel empty. I don't want that life anymore. I just want you. But the more I learned about her past, the harder it was to ignore. Before she met me, Esther was infamous for her wild lifestyle. She had been with countless men, often juggling multiple partners at once. There were stories of late-night parties, alcohol-fueled hookups, and moments of sheer debauchery. Her friends, the ones she still kept in touch with, sometimes made snide comments about her past, laughing at old memories as if they were inside jokes I wasn't supposed to understand. At first, I tried to convince myself that it didn't matter. Everyone has a past. Who was I to judge? But deep down, it gnawed at me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was just another name on her long list of conquests. Despite all of this, I stayed. Maybe it was because of how deeply I had fallen for her. Maybe it was because, despite everything, she made me feel like I was the only man in the world when we were together. Or maybe it was because of what we shared behind closed doors. Esther was electrifying in bed. She knew exactly what she was doing, every touch, every movement designed to drive me insane. She had an energy, a confidence that left me breathless. She wasn't just good, she was extraordinary. She did things I had never experienced before, things that made me question if I had ever truly known passion before her. She had a way of making me feel like I was the best she had ever had, whispering things in my ear that stroked my ego and made me crave her even more. She was insatiable, always ready, always eager. She introduced me to things I never thought I would enjoy, made me push my own boundaries. It was intoxicating, addictive. And maybe that's why I kept overlooking all the red flags. Maybe that's why, despite knowing what she had been, despite every doubt clawing at the back of my mind, I convinced myself that she had changed. Because when she looked at me with those hungry eyes, when she pulled me into her world of pleasure and desire, it was impossible to think of anything else. But love can blind a man, and in my case, it made me ignore every glaring red flag that was right in front of me. I don't know when I first started suspecting that Esther hadn't really changed. Maybe it was the way she became protective of her phone, how she always tilted the screen away from me when she texted. Maybe it was the way she dressed differently when she went out without me, skirts shorter, tops tighter. Or maybe it was the little things, like the way she always seemed distracted, as if her mind was somewhere else when she was with me. Then came the warnings. My best friend Daniel pulled me aside one evening. "Keith," he said carefully, "I don't want to overstep, but I saw Esther with some guy the other night. They looked close." I laughed it off at first. "She has guy friends, Dan. It's not a crime." But he didn't let it go. She was also on a dating app. A friend of mine saw her profile. My stomach twisted. I wanted to call Esther immediately, to demand an explanation. But I knew how it would go. She would get defensive, she would turn it around on me, and I would end up feeling like the bad guy for even doubting her. So I decided to be smart. If she was lying to me, I needed to catch her in the act. Asking her outright wouldn't work. She would manipulate her way out of it like she always did. I started paying more attention. Esther became more secretive, often stepping out to take phone calls, and she started spending more time away from home. When I asked her about it, she brushed me off. "I've just been busy with work," she'd say. "You're being paranoid." But I wasn't paranoid. The signs were all there, and Daniel's warning only confirmed what I already feared. Then I came up with a plan. I told Esther I had a business trip coming up, a 3-day work retreat out of town. She barely questioned it. She kissed me goodbye, barely hiding her excitement at having the house to herself. But I never left town. Instead, I stayed back, keeping an eye on things. I didn't want to believe it, but deep down, I knew what I would find. I rented a room at a hotel near our apartment and waited. I needed undeniable proof, something that even she couldn't explain away. On the first night, she didn't do anything unusual. She stayed home, ordered takeout, and watched TV. I almost felt guilty for doubting her, but by the second night, my worst fears became a reality. At around 8 p.m., she left the house wearing an outfit that was far too revealing for a casual dinner. I followed her from a safe distance, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. She met up with a man, not just any man, but someone I had never seen before. They were laughing, touching, and the way she looked at him, like he was the only man in the world, made my stomach churn. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay calm. I took pictures, documented everything, but I needed more. I needed to catch her in the act. So I waited. When she went back home, she wasn't alone. A few minutes later, another man arrived. My pulse pounded in my ears as I realized what was about to happen. This wasn't just cheating. This was something far worse. I don't know what I was expecting, but nothing could have prepared me for what I saw when I walked through that door. The air was thick with the scent of sweat and perfume. Moans filled the room, Esther's moans. And they weren't the quiet, restrained sounds I was used to. They were raw, uninhibited, filled with pleasure so intense that it felt like a slap to my face. And then I saw them. Esther, my wife, with two men, and she was loving every second of it. I stood frozen, unable to move, unable to breathe. The way she arched her back, the way she gripped them, the unrestrained hunger in her eyes. It was something I had never seen before. It was as if she had been set free, indulging in pleasures she had never shared with me. A primal rage surged through me. "What the hell is this?" My voice was hoarse, shaking. Esther's eyes snapped open. Shock flickered across her face before it was replaced with something else. Annoyance. "Keith," she started, but I cut her off. "Don't," I said, my voice filled with barely contained fury. "Just don't." The men scrambled to grab their clothes, avoiding my gaze. But I didn't care about them. My eyes were locked on the woman I had loved, the woman I had trusted. Without another word, I turned and walked away. And with each step, I felt the love I had for her die a slow, painful death. Leaving Esther wasn't hard. The hardest part was facing myself. I had no one to blame but myself. The signs had always been there. I even remember vividly one night when Esther told me she always had the fantasy of being pleasured by two different men at the same time. But I had chosen to ignore them, blinded by love, by desire, by my own naive belief that people could truly change. The divorce was swift. She didn't beg this time. She didn't cry or try to convince me to stay. Maybe because she knew she had lost all credibility, or maybe because she had never really cared about me in the first place. For weeks, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that night, the betrayal, the truth I had been too blind to see. I hated myself for loving her. I hated myself for staying after the first time she cheated. I hated myself for believing in a lie. And one day I woke up and realized that I didn't love her anymore, that she had no power over me, that I was free. Maybe love had blinded me, but betrayal had opened my eyes. And for that, I would never let myself be a fool again.